almost there. I have my pleasure to introduce Steve and Tracy. I didn't have him send me anything ahead of time. The word for the morning is spontaneity, by the way, or improvisation or something. So let's look forward to a little more of that as we finish up. Steve is at UMass Amherst. He is both a musician, a working musician, I guess I can say, and a professor. And he is a Chutian, is that right? Chutian scholar in China, as well as in Wuhan, in China, as well as in Massachusetts. So talk about commuting. His first book, Langston Hughes and the Blues, is about to be translated into Chinese. So that's very exciting for him. And his next book is entitled, I think, provocatively, Futuristic Jungleism. And that will be out from the University of Alabama in 2015. So please join me in welcoming Steve Tracy.
Thank you very much. The question that follows that is that the blues? And the answer to the question is no. It's not the blues, or rather, we need to think of the blues in a different kind of a sense, in the kind of a sense that James Baldwin understood the blues in Sonny's Blues in order to see what it is. That was actually the first section of a version of Amazing Grace that I played for my father when he had his final heart attack. He was in the emergency room in intensive care, and the folks told us there, one of the things you can do is continue to communicate with people who are in a coma or don't seem to be conscious, and that's a kind of a way of keeping them here. And it's kind of a way of making sure you still have that that connection, and maybe it'll bring them back out. We don't know. It's not just all medicine. It's all this other stuff mixed in too, of human feelings and emotions and connections. But like many men of my generation and earlier, I guess I'd never talked that much to my father. We knew we loved each other and everything like that, but I never talked that much to him. But he was a harmonica player, and I was a harmonica player. So I said, I think I'm going to play the harmonica. And maybe that'll be a way of communicating, of making that connection. So I came up with a way of playing the harmonica that was distinctive in terms of the progression in which I played it, that kind of told the story of how I felt about where he was at the time, and how I was trying to come to terms with that. And I was trying to come to terms with that through the way that I played the music. He didn't come out of it, so it didn't work that way, but at least it's given me something to talk about. I guess that's better than nothing. But the whole point of it is that you probably didn't know that was Amazing Grace. No. And unless I told you that. Now the second way I play it, in the way that I play it, is in tempo, melody, no crescendos or decrescendos or any of that kind of stuff. It's a concentration on form. The first one is the concentration on emotion. And that means it sounds as if I'm playing whatever I want to play, whenever I want to play it, with no conductor out here telling me I got to go to the next note, or I got to go to the next anything. It's all from inside here. And so in a sense, that emphasis on emotion, that emphasis on what people frequently call a bluesy kind of feeling, is part of Amazing Grace as well. And this is, again, as I say, the kind of thing that Baldwin is talking about in Sonny's Blues, when he brings together a variety of different kinds of music. He calls this Sonny's Blues. But there are lots of other different kinds of songs. In fact, the song that we frequently associate with Billie Holiday, Am I Blue, that they play climactic scene in the story, is a pop song. It doesn't have the blues form. It doesn't have blues language, blues lyrics, and blues emphases on certain kinds of blues symbolism or any of those kinds of things. It's a pop song. And I think this is part of the point that Baldwin is trying to make. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about, interrogate the blues in Sonny's Blues. And one of the questions that we'll ask is, when we ask, Am I Blue? Is, well, what in the world is blue? What does it mean to be blue? And where and when and how can one be blue? And what does it mean when one plays the blues? Because there are different ideas about such things. One of the things about the short story is this: there's so many references to hearing and listening, and it's a very biblical thing. Hear, O Israel. This is one of the kind of central directives that's made in the Bible. Hear, listen to these things, and the story is so oral. We can hear so many things. We can hear, when we had someone talking the other day about the beat in Baldwin and the rhythm in Baldwin, we can hear those things pounding throughout the story in different kinds of ways. So we need to think about the way what we hear. And one of the things that we hear is the connection to the West African musical tradition. We hear the emphasis on percussiveness, not just drums, but playing instruments in a percussive fashion. You're playing harmonica in a percussive fashion, and guitars are played in percussive fashion, and pianos are played in percussive fashion. It's the beat, it's the percussion there that's very important. It's the polyrhythms, the many different rhythms that sound at once. It's the syncopation. We're going to talk about all these things. It's the what some scholars call voice masking. I hate this. because it's not really masking. It's a kind of a liberation of voice to do other different kinds of things other than the conventional mainstream European American kinds of things that Americans are used to. There's a use of what we call pitched spaces, and of course call and response. A few years ago, I was called into, I won a contest, the National Harmonica Contest, and one of the prizes was to be on the Johnny Carson show, the night show, right? So, when I got back to Cincinnati, the head of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra called me up and said, "We'd like for you to come down and record a song with us, and perform with us, and we want to record a song too." I said, "Okay, so I can read the music a little bit, but I'm, I was feeling kind of paranoid about it because I'm going to be in a room full of all these trained musicians. They're doing Mozart or Beethoven and all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to come in, and I still had kind of inferiority complex about what I was playing, especially when they established the rules, the ground rules of what things are supposed to be. I didn't feel that way if I was in my own element, but when you walk in somewhere else, you start feeling a little paranoid, a little challenged by it. So I said, "Okay, I'll come down and do it." I thought, in these days, I always thought that when they recorded like symphonies and stuff like that they would record the whole thing. They recorded like 15 seconds at a time. They have 30 seconds at a time, and then shut it off. They get paid all this money, and you got to, when they do single takes for blues and jazz and all that kind of stuff, why can't you all do this? But anyway, I'm just looking at them saying, well, maybe I don't feel so bad. But so anyway, I come in, and the conductor is up in the front. He died just about a year ago. He's standing, he said, "Now, Tracy," he said, "I'm going to be standing over here. I'm going to be conducting this stuff. We're doing a thing called Richard Hayman's Pops Hoedown." So that's what they want me to play a hoedown on the harmonica, right? That's why they brought me in. So he says, "It's going to Pops Hoedown." It was fanfare for the common man. It's based on the work that the guy who did fanfare for the common man?
Copeland.
Copeland, yes, Aaron Copeland. Thank you. It's based on something of Copeland's, and so. He said, "I'm going to be standing over here, and you're going to be standing over there by your microphone." And he said, "And I'm going to be conducting. I'll start conducting." He said, "You're standing over there way by the microphone." He said, "No, I'm going to point to you." And he said, "So you're going to be standing over here, and you're going to, come up to the microphone, and you start to play. You play your stuff then, and there was what wanted me to play Turkey in the Straw, which is also the song that provided the melody for Jump Jim Crow. So you play all that." He said, "When you're finished, you step back. I'll cut the machine off. You go over. You get paid. You go. The whole thing takes 30 seconds." I said, "Okay, that sounds easy enough." On the inside, I'm saying, "Oh God, I hope I don't screw this up. I'm going to be so embarrassed if I screw this up." So he's over there conducting. He's conducting like this. All of a sudden, he points at me. Right over here, I come over to the microphone, I go, and he says, "What?" Oh my God, please. 2 seconds already, he stopped the thing. "Please don't let this be." He says, "Tracy." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're tapping your foot." I said, "I always tap." I said, "This is the dance song. It's a percussive song. You've got to have the beat. You've got polyrhythms. And one of the ways that you can organize all the polyrhythms, you've got to have that beat there so people know where the beat is and everything. It's a West African tradition and all this things. No sounds of tapping feet in European classical music." No sounds of tapping feet in European classical music. And I was going to point out to him that it really wasn't European classical music that they were playing. It was European classical music version of something else, I said, "But that's the tradition." I said, "Okay." He said, "I'm going to come over here. I'm going to start conducting. I'll point to you. You step up the microphone. No tapping of feet. Play the song. Finished. 30 seconds. Come over, get your money, you go home. We're all done." I said, okay. So he's conducting. He points to me. I'm over here by the microphone. I step up to the microphone and I step on my foot. I said, okay, I'm not going to tap my foot here. I said, he said, wait a minute. I said, oh man, this can't be me. Again, he says, Tracy. And I said, yeah. And he said, I can hear you breathe. And I said, yeah, I do breathe when I play. A wind instrument, and I'm breathing. I said, and not only that, I said, but because this is a dance song, people who are listening to the dance music, they kind of get into hearing people putting forth the effort, and it makes people move, and it makes people feel the music and all this. No sounds of breathing in European classical music. No sounds of breathing in European classical music. I said, well, in the West African tradition, and also in the African American tradition, people will sometimes use the breath, as an additional sound. So that people don't say, because the conductor is saying, what we want is the pure sound. Beware of people who want the pure anything. Ellison taught me this, right? Beware of people who want the pure anything. He says, we want the pure sound. I said, but for example, when African American performers would do train imitations, they would want the sound of the whistle and the steam and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, so see, you blow around the notes in addition to blowing through the notes, and you have the sound of the whole train. I said it makes the performance what it is, and it says I don't rule out anything as a source of music. Anything can be a source of music. Anything can be made into a musical instrument, and you have to figure out ways. Not European classical musicians don't play through their horns and around their horns too. It's just always through your horn. Another thing is, sometimes instrumentalists will make their instruments growl. Little kind of growly, rough edge when the note is being played, and where that comes from is spit. You have the spit in your mouth, and you gurgle like a baby while you're playing the note. No sounds of gurgling spit in European classical music. Sure, no sounds of gurgling spit in European classical music. When I was in band, the band conductor would always say, you need to use your spit valve. I can hear your spit. But blues performers taught me to embrace my spit, so to speak, as a musician. To say, whatever it is that you need to do to communicate what you communicate, do it. And there's a great liberation in that. Finally, I can do what I want to do with my instrument as opposed to sit there without tapping my feet and reading the notes off the page. All of a sudden, there's something different I can do. So he says, okay, so no, you can't make noises of breathing. We don't make noises of breathing. I said, okay. He said, okay, so I'm going to come over here And I'm going to, he was really kind of condescending, I think. But I'm going to go over here and he said, I'm going to start conducting. Comes time for you to play, I'm going to point to you. You step up the microphone, no tapping of feet. You're not allowed to make sounds of breathing. Play the music. You're out of here. Go get your check. Everything's over. So he's conducting. I'm over here. I come over and he points over to me. So I step up the microphone. I'm stepping on my foot. How am I not going to make these sounds of breathing? And I start playing. He says, wait a minute. I said, what? I didn't wait for him to say Tracy. I said, what? And he says, I need you to watch me for a second. He said, watch my conductor's baton. Da, 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 da. He said, you see those points where the baton is stopping? Those are the points where you have to play the notes. Exactly the way they're written on the page. And I said, I don't think that song has ever been played that way in its entire history. Since the 1840s, I don't think it's ever been played that stiffly. He said, you got to play what's on the page. And I said, but it's in a tradition where people kind of anticipate notes and then they fall a little bit behind a beat. And they have not what you call pitch points, pitch spaces. We see these in West African music. There's certain kinds of West African music, and we see these in African American music. So you play not just that's the way it will be written on a page in a European classical style. It's not very funky. That ba-bum-ba-bum, syncopate the notes. It's syncopating the notes, and there's syncopation in this music. It's more than just that, but I mean, you gotta let that happen. He said, no pitch spaces in European classical music. That's just it. And so finally we came to some kind of understanding about what I could do and what I couldn't do. And I was totally tied up in knots, but somehow managed to get through the rest of that. It's on a CD called Roundup. Eric Kunzel and the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. Roundup and Pop's Hoedown. So part of the I don't get royalties. You know what? They listed everybody. I think there was somebody who shot off a cannon. They listed the man who shot off the cannon, and they did not list the harmonica player. So that's just so you know where we rank in the relative order of things. Harmonica is below cannonballer or cannonballer or something like that. The point being is they are radically different traditions, and they communicate radically different kinds of things. And a number of years ago, Alan Lomax from the Library of Congress did a number of articles in which he talked about a term that he coined called cantometrics, in which he said the nature of the music of any given people arises out of the social conditions, social political conditions in which those people exist. And so he says, if you go to a certain place in the world, the kind of music you hear will explain the culture to you. It will explain to you, and listen, it doesn't work that well, but at least it's a nice idea. It is an interesting idea, and it has, I think, some connections to what I would like to talk about. So we take a look at these characteristics and think about what they mean in relation to the blues, and then we can understand how Baldwin uses the blues in Sonny's Blues, and really makes far more references to the blues in the story than it even seems that he does, because of this kind of nature of what it is that the blues accomplishes. If I can go back to John Henry for a second, one of the things that's important for us to think about is this notion of polyrhythms. African music is very polyrhythmic, and African American music is very polyrhythmic as well. The point here is that there are a number of different rhythms that are sounding all at the same time, simultaneously. The sounding of these rhythms all at the same time has to be coordinated in relation to the central beat, the percussive feeling, the central beat, or it can become very chaotic. There are individual performers, especially in the African American tradition and in certain kind of guitar traditions especially, but also in the harmonica tradition too, who will play a song all by themselves, but manage to make the song polyrhythmic at the same time. I'm going to try to use some of this material, but since the audio is not working, that makes it a little bit more difficult. But this is a version of John Henry. You know who John Henry was, the steel driving man who persevered against the overwhelming odds to defeat the steam drill and the age of the machine age and urban industrialization and all those kinds of things. He demonstrated that, the dignity, the strength, the power, the perseverance of human beings. And so they made up a song, or at least a number of songs about him, which were widely played in the very late 19th and early 20th century, although surprisingly not as many recordings of John Henry as we might expect, number one. And number two, despite the fact that he was a black man, the song was recorded more frequently by white performers than it was black performers. So it's a very interesting kind of dynamic there. But anyway, since he's on the train, first of all, you gotta start with a kind of train sound. But what I always start off with, I'm sorry. What I always start off is with the tapping of the foot, So there you got one rhythm going, and then. And you got another rhythm going when you start playing the harmonica. And one of the things you can do then is you can use that blowing around the harmonica to create other kinds of accents that are not the same as this and not the same as the other rhythmic accent I was playing. So, you have that kind of going on. So you got three rhythms going on, and then you can open and close your hands, and that can cause also for there to be kind of an opening up and a closing up of the notes that gives you kind of another different kind of rhythm that's taking place too. And then when you do all that enough so that people hear them in their heads, then you start playing the melody. And when you start playing the melody, people are still hearing the boom ba boom ba boom ba boom ba and all those kinds of things. And so you can stop and play the melody, and people think that the other stuff is still going on, because whenever there's a break in the melody, you throw some of that other stuff back in there, and you can make a polyrhythmic song as an individual. These kind of polyrhythms that are all taking place. Now the question is, what does it mean to have such a polyrhythmic music? There's a beautiful recording, I wish I could play it, of Johnny Otis. I'm going to go at least to the picture anyway. There's a man named Johnny Otis who actually looks as if he is It's black. Oh, there's old John Henry. Looks as if he's black in Louis Jordan's, but actually was a Greek performer, and he lived his entire life as a musician and as a family man in the African American community. Yes.
So we're wondering if you could, if it's possible to broadcast the sound off your laptop, but just put the mic over the laptop.
I don't know. Something just came up that says my battery level is low now, so it may not be possible because it looks like the battery is going to run out. I couldn't get that to plug in there. But anyway, Johnny Otis did a recording of the song called 1 O'Clock Jump. And Johnny Otis did it with Ben Webster on saxophone. This is in the 1950s, and Webster is kind of straddling rhythm and blues and jazz at the time. And there's this wonderful kind of low brass, high brass, and reeds kind of all playing different things at the same time. And you have to imagine people going absolutely out of their minds, by the way that these polyrhythms, which have, as I said, the possibility of going just really crazy on you and being so chaotic, just being so focused and so driven that it just like swinging you to heaven or something like that. Incredible. But there was a song by Jackie Wilson called Baby Work Out, in which he used a big band, because I think he had sung with Basie, but then he also uses a chorus to sing with him as well. And the polyrhythms in these kinds of songs later on that are picked up from earlier performers like Tommy McLennan, or really one of the best songs in terms of demonstrating polyrhythms is a song by Charlie Patton called Pony Blues. So if you ever get a chance to listen to a Charlie Patton, it's just a beautiful polyrhythms, and the guitar playing is so complex, but also so simple. This is what I like about Langston Hughes. It's so complex, but it's so simple that you could just move just right into the music, and it's not as if you're overburdened by having to listen to all the parts. They all make sense. They're all incredibly well put together. So we have these kinds of polyrhythms which demonstrate. This is one of the things that Alan Lomax talks about, is that there are lots of voices. There are lots of different ideas in the community. But that in a polyrhythmic song, these different voices, these different ideas are brought together in an orderly fashion that gives you a cohesive, cooperative community. A community that works together. We'll talk about that later in relation to Sonny's Blues, but I think you know where it's going. Those rhythms you have to listen to each other, you have to give each other space, you have to support each other. You start sometimes with a head arrangement, and then you take them and let everybody say what they want to say, with some people backing up or supporting when people are saying, and then it's all over. It's like a successful communal arrangement. It's like how many people have said this? It's like what American democracy is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, right? And Ellison talks about this at the end of Invisible Man, right? Ellison talks exactly about this. So then we have the polyrhythms of a song like John Henry. We have syncopation, which we already kind of talked about. You know where the word syncopation comes from? Yes. Shame on you all, shame on you all, shame on you all. You've been here, but how long have I been talking? I don't even know. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. Not a single one of you have thought anything about the fact that your heart has been beating this whole time. Right? When will you think about whether your heart is beating? When it stops. when you skip a beat, when it stops, then all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, what's happening? In fact, if your heart skips a beat, it kind of wakes you up. As long as it doesn't keep skipping or stop altogether, it's going to wake you up. It's going to say, hey, wait a minute. I didn't know that there was something going on, like clockwork. that stops. And all of a sudden you say, I'm aware of my heartbeat. I'm aware that there's a place in between heartbeats. I'm aware that there are nodes of existence. Thoreau talks about traveling to the beat of a different drummer. There are ways in which things proceed. And syncopation makes us aware of what happens in the spaces in between. And you know what happens in the spaces in between? Louis Armstrong happens in the spaces in between, right? And Charlie Parker happens in the spaces in between. And John Coltrane happens in the spaces in between. And Little Walter and Jackie Wilson, all this stuff happens in the spaces in between. And that extremely syncopated music. There's a whole world, we might say, a whole country, another country, right? There's another country between those nodes. And so syncopation awakens us to that notion that if the regular beats of American society are the official beats of American society, there's kind of vernacular space in between where blues and bluegrass and jazz and all those kinds of things exist, and where they live and where they provide all the information that they can provide. But syncopation. We talked a little bit about this notion of voice masking, which I don't like. Voice masking simply means that someone uses a singing voice that sounds unlike their speaking voice. Many people do this, but in West African music, in African American music, frequently we'll have people growl, or we'll have people moan, or we'll have people hit high falsetto notes. This is one of the things that Jackie Wilson does so well, And Howard Wolf has got that rough, gritty voice, that he sings in. And B.B. King will sometimes get a little rough when he sings a high note, or get very, very sweet when he's talking about Lucille, or any counterpart to Lucille that he happens to be thinking of at that time. So that voice masking means kind of changing your voice in order to inflect, to create different kinds of emotional ideas. I prefer to call it a kind of voice liberation or a voice creation, a vocal creation, just in the sense that what it helps you do is create an identity, or create a feeling with your voice that transcends the kind of normal, everyday, mundane kind of thing. This, again, to make a kind of side reference to Invisible Man, a character named Peter Wheatstraw, who was a real blues singer. And Peter Wheatstraw creates this name for himself, Petey Wheatstraw, because he does not accept the mundane identity that had been thrust upon him every day. He wants to be Petey Wheatstraw. He wants to be Howard Wolf. He wants to be, King Bull Constrictor. Yes, that's right. The devil's son-in-law, the high sheriff from hell. He creates this. And this is one of the things that Ellison is trying to emphasize so much in Invisible Man, the creativity of the folk community. And this has to do also, I think, with the different kinds of techniques that are created. Look at a guitar. Look at a guitar, you see all the fret lines on there. What does the blues and jazz performer do? They push beyond the boundaries. They'll use a slide this way, put a piece of metal or glass on their hand and slide it up and down. And all those boundaries, all those borders, all this, gone. They're gone, which they ought to be. So we have this notion of creating a voice, or different kinds of voices that you use at different times to express exactly what it is you want to express in particular spaces. We also talked about pitch spaces, and one of the great performers, unfortunately, who we can't get to now, but one of the great performers is one who's not so well known. Her name is Bessie Tucker, and she was a Texas singer who recorded in the 1920s. Bessie Tucker sang like a field holler performer. She went way back into the 19th century, sang field hollers, but kind of very roughly imposed a kind of blues structure in terms of line patterns and things on the songs. And the piano player would just play, and he'd wait until he figured out that she was going to the turn of the lyric or something like that, and would jump into it. So sometimes we'll talk about 12-bar blues or something like that, but frequently 12-bar blues are 13 and a half bars or 16 bars. Sometimes they may be 10 and a half. If it works, hey, you don't argue with it, right? But except for the conductor from Cincinnati. If it works, you don't argue with it. And Patton was an incredible guy for doing that. Are you looking at me significantly? Let's see. It should be. I don't know. If you can get anything, you're a better man than I. So she was singing these pitch spaces. So you got this song called "I Got Cut All to Pieces." That should be it. Yeah. You'll see the word. So you got this song called "I Got Cut All to Pieces." I'm really going to give you a chance to hear her sing it before I try to do it myself. That would be much better. So a click should take us to Billie Holiday. A click will bring us to part one, and a click will bring us to Ellen. Another click will bring us to Billy. Another click to John Henry. Another click to Louis George. And there's Bessie Tucker. If we can play her and hear her, I'll be thrilled. Doesn't take much, does it? See if you can move over this way a little bit farther, and if anything else appears in here. Yeah, click on that. Well, if it comes up, I'll stop it. So we got Bessie Tucker talking about these pitch spaces, which means you don't have to hit something right there, not right there. There's a kind of space in which you are allowed to kind of bend up to a note or bend down from a note or quaver on a note or all these kinds of things, which you frequently cannot, notate on a page of music. So it's hard to write those kinds of things down, but it gives you the freedom. Instead of having to hit that note just exactly like that, it gives you the freedom to wander up to it or come down from it, inflect it any kind of way you want, and make it sad or make it happy or make it sweet or make it nasty or make it any kind of way you want to make it. And then we have, of course, the notion of call and response, which we hear a great deal in work songs, and we hear in plantation songs and things like that, which turn up a great deal in all kinds of blues that were recorded since actually a little bit before the 1920s on. That gives an opportunity for a voice to say something and have a response from the community. There's communication here. Sometimes it's even overlapping communication. So somebody, before they finish saying what they want to say, the response comes in. And so there's no space in between. It's just a continuing call and response between individual and community, which is, in another way, a kind of ability to maintain an individuality and a connection to the group at the same time. This is extremely important for a blues player, for a jazz player, for people who play any kind of African American music, to retain that kind of connection, so that you have your individuality, but it is firmly rooted in the tradition itself. So in call and response, like from Johnny Otis's 1 O'Clock Jump, or Jackie Wilson's Baby Workout, we hear all of these kinds of calls and responses coming back and forth. It really, really is like a revival meeting. It really is a people saying, the blues is not a religious music, the blues is not a spiritual music. And there are some ways in which that is true, and there are some significant ways in which it is not true. that elements of what we've just been talking about here in relation to the blues can also be applied to jazz, and can also be applied to gospel, and can also be applied to hip hop, and can also be applied to all different kinds of African American music. So, one of the questions we ask ourselves is, so why is it that when people started talking about African American written literature that is influenced by music, why did they choose the blues? Because they're all these kind of characteristics are also associated with gospel and other kinds of African American musics as well. I'm not entirely sure I can answer that question. I have some thoughts about it, but I think what's most important to say is this: don't make so many boundaries between them. Don't try to separate what the musicians don't separate. Go ask a musician. A musician will play anything. You ask him what he's playing, he'll say, or he'll say, music. Playing music. There's a guy who I met a number of years ago, was doing a radio show in Cincinnati. His name was Robert Ferguson. He was given the nickname, he had his huge voice. And he was a kind of a Wynonie Harris imitator, but he also kind of tried to go off his own too. And they named him H-Bomb Ferguson, because his voice was so huge and so loud. And he traveled around a little bit with B.B. King, and they traveled through the South. And he said, now, we would come into a town, and the white folks would meet us at the city limits. And they would say, follow us. Don't go anywhere else. so they would take us right to the club, back door. So they would stand there while we loaded all our stuff into the club. And so we get into the club, and it's interesting because we got the stage here, and they got this rope that runs right down the middle of the club, all the way down to the back of the club. There's a rope. There's just a rope that's running down here. And he said, you know what that was for? I said, well, I kind of got an idea, but why don't you tell me? He said, they put the white folks on one side, and they put the black folks on the other side, see? So everybody could get in, everybody could see us. He said, look, listen, the black folks were lucky in this case that we weren't pointed this way and they're standing behind us. Because sometimes, dancing behind us, because sometimes that happened in the clubs too. So he said, so they have a rope. White folks, black folks. We start playing at the beginning of the evening, and the white folks are over here dancing, the black folks are over here dancing, the rope running down the thing. Oh, soon enough, somebody pushes into the rope over here, and somebody pushes, the rope starts swinging. It starts swinging, and a little bit longer, the rope starts swinging a little bit more, and then, oh my God, it falls down on the floor. It falls on the floor. So people are, they're dancing on this side, they're dancing on that side. All of a sudden, somebody's a foot steps over the rope and goes back over this way. I'm not a dancer, you can tell, right? a foot goes over this way, and then a foot goes over this way. And as soon as he said, by the end of the night, everybody's all mixed up together. He said, that's the power, see, of African American music. By the end of the night, everybody's all mixed together. It is one space in Mississippi, for 2.5 hours. People are mixed together. He said, now, when the show was over, they told us to go out the back door. They drove us to the city limits out the other side, and you're gone. So he said, so it didn't last, beyond that little space there. But you got that musical space. No, that's the freest place in America because of the music. It's taking the boundaries down. It's taking the boundaries down. And it's giving people freedom. So that one of the things we need to think about when we think about the music is to think about the ways in which it confronts Western music. Now, I should say this. In West Africa, for example, there were lots of ways in which West African music had some of these characteristics and was not confronting Western music, right? Okay, but once Africans were kidnapped and brought to this country, they did have to face those kinds of elements. And so it did, I think, begin to take on those kinds of implications, that kind of challenge, and the kind of sense that what we need to do is bring a little freedom to this country over here that calls itself a democratic place. And so the music, I think, has these kinds of characteristics in general that we can then think about in the context of the story of Sonny's Blues. We also need to think about, just in terms of general meaning of the blues, what the history is, because Sonny's brother talks in the story, but Sonny went all the way back and told the whole story. You know, I mean, the music does tell the story, and especially for the blues begins to tell this story from around the time that the first generation of African Americans who were born outside of slavery came to majority. Because now you can have a group of people who are trying to figure out what to do with this American society without elders who have had the exact same experience that they're facing right now. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this? And so what does the blues begin to deal with? It begins to deal with finally being able to choose your own spouse. You know, it begins to, and one of the most common elements that it deals with is travel. Why? Because I'm stuck on this old plantation. I haven't been able to get off of it for all this time. Now is the opportunity to have mobility. So you have lots of songs about traveling. I'm going away. I'm going this place and that place. I'm coming back. You know, whatever it is. Now I have mobility. Now I can choose a spouse. Now, you know, there are certain kinds of things that the blues seems to express, most importantly because of the time at which it emerged. So it does tell a story. And there's one other interesting thing, and we probably talk about in relation to West Africa, and that is this whole idea of people talking with music. Talking drums we probably have all heard about. I got this recording a number of years ago. They were throwing it away at the University of Cincinnati. It's an album of 78 RPM records, the real old ones, you know. And they had this stuff out on the table, and you could just take it. This was a collection of recordings done by Laura Bolton in Africa in 1938, in which are in perfect condition. I think somebody mistakenly bought these, right? And they never played them. And there are these incredible, clear recordings of all different kinds of West African music from the time. One of which is this. It's called a war horn. And it's done by the crew of Nigeria. And what Laura Bolton said was, you tell me, you know, that you communicate with an instrument. I'd like to have that demonstrated somehow. So what happened was, they got the person to play this horn, and it would sound something like that, you know. And then she said, then I want to translate it into the language of the tribe. Tell me exactly what's being said by the horn, and then I want somebody to translate that into English. And so she has these, you know, all these directives. It was about war. So they're saying, oh, be careful, somebody's coming up on the left-hand side. But it was just, but everybody understood it to be, watch out, there's somebody coming up on the left-hand side. Or if anybody runs away, we're going to get whipped, and you have to stay here and fight, and all these kinds of things. It's incredible. It is a tone language, you know. But the point is that it really is communicating very precisely through music, very precisely. So when somebody praises the blues and jazz performance, says, "Man, they really told a story and they made their instrument talk," there may be more to it than that. You know, it's not just I can track the emotions or something like that, but there's something about in A Love Supreme, there's a section of A Love Supreme where John Coltrane plays the rhythms of words, and the poem is like printed in the liner notes, and he's playing the rhythms of the words themselves. So there could be, even very precisely, a kind of very specific communication. When the brother says, Sonny went back and told the story of this and told the story of that and told the story of something else. It doesn't just have to be kind of an impressionistic thing. The brother is actually hearing the kind of interior voice of the music and hearing the rhythm and the tone and all those kinds of things as well. There's a philosophy which is expressed frequently by the words, "The sun's going to shine in my back door someday," which is a line that Son House sings in a song called Delta Blues. And when we listen to and we read James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues, Sonny talks about being in prison. He says, I was in a really deep hole, and I look up, and what was up there? It's like the sun was shining down. The sun was shining down. There's also another blues song that goes like this. If you don't believe I'm sinking, look what a hole I'm in. Sometimes it's sung that way 3 times. Sometimes, if you don't believe I'm sinking, look what a hole I'm in. If you don't believe I love you, look what a fool I'm in. Which also works, right? So these kinds of ideas of being in shadow and darkness and in deep holes and the sun shining down and all these things are very much a part of the blues tradition too. Now listen, they're also a part of non-blues traditions as well, But particularly in a story that Baldwin chooses to name Sonny's Blues. Sometimes someone will ask me, how can I tell when something is a blues story or a blues song or a blues poem or something like that? And I say, well, if it says blues in the title, that's one of the ways. Then all of a sudden, everything kicks in. You start thinking about the history, the tradition, the aesthetics, all these kinds of things we're talking about, and saying, where is all that in the story? And we have such issues as the relation of the community in both the North and the South. Folk communities in the North and the South. Some people think that folklore is only a Southern thing, but of course there's Northern folklore too and urban folklore as well. The relation to the folk communities, the relation to social and political elements too. A lot of people, I think it was misunderstood, but it's been attributed to Paul Oliver that he said the blues is not a very political music. There's not very much protest in the blues. I think that's not exactly what he meant. But anyway, there is a lot of protest in the blues, and one of them is that the blues exists at all, because you're not supposed to be speaking in public. You're not supposed to have a public voice. So if you begin speaking in public, whatever you say is a political act. Number one. Number two, I think that as Angela Davis and various others have talked about, female blues singers would frequently create a space for women to talk about domestic violence in their blues as well. And so this bringing this to the fore, this makes blues singers among those folks who attempt to raise issues publicly which then must be dealt with in some kind of way publicly as well. So Sonny's playing the blues in this story is nothing strange in terms of his trying to wake up his brother, trying in a sense to kind of protest to his brother that they haven't quite had the community connection or the family connection that he would like to have had, and which is exemplified in the blues tradition itself. As I said already earlier, blues and spirituals and gospel and jazz and all these things have similar kinds of elements to them. So that you can use songs like The Old Ship of Zion, or I Can Hear My Mother Play Again, or God Be With You, or This Little Light of Mine, or you could use Am I Blue, or you can use Jimmy Rushing's version of Boogie Woogie, in which he sings various kinds of elements that also turn up in this story too. You're Gonna Need Me, Baby, one of these cold rainy days, is from a blues recording, of course, and he probably got it from Jimmy Rushing. Baldwin probably got it from Rushing, although it also turns up in a number of other places as well. rushing things you're going to long for me some cold rainy day. But still, the brother establishes his relationship to his brother from a blues lyric and makes that, again, that kind of connection. But he doesn't say it to his brother. See, this is the problem. They're not speaking to each other on the level of and the depth of blues performance that would help the two of them, I think. So what this tradition seems to do then is to affirm identity and to express community and to declare freedom and to establish communication. What is Sonny's Blues about? That's what Sonny's Blues is about, And that's why I think Baldwin decided to name the story Sonny's Blues, because he doesn't. I thought he was going to play Sonny's Blues in the club at the end of the story, and he's playing "Am I Blue?" And so you wonder why does he pick a pop song to play? And I think it's because of this, because you can use the blues to transform anything. Here we go. You know what that song is? No? This is what that song was. You can blue anything. You just say, it's a sad day for Elmo. That's why that's what you can express with that. It's a transformation. It's the Langston Hughes poem in which it talks about the weary blues, in which he talks about making the poor piano moan with melody. With his ebony hands on each ivory key. It's a transformation. Somebody looked at the harmonica, and they said, that doesn't do everything I want it to do. Now, what I got to do is make it do what I want it to do, make it express what I want to express. That's the genius. That even the person, as Langston Hughes talks about, who's in the small little club in Harlem, not where all the lights are and the fancy dancing girls and all that kind of stuff, some of the small little bar in Harlem takes the piano and transforms it into something beautiful, something people thought it couldn't do, thought it couldn't be. Isn't that what Sonny's Blues is about? I think so. It's not only the presence of those, the Old Ship of Zion, of course, has its relevancy. Get on board. Get on board. It's community. If I could hear my mother pray again, it's about reconnection. About getting things back together again. God be with you till we meet again. There's a separation between people, and the desire to have some kind of connection, the spiritual one, does not have to be a religious one, between two folks. This little light of mine, that's what Sonny's got. It's the only light we got in all this darkness is this music. And Sonny's got that light that he shines out. And his brother has to learn to see that. They put his brother, remember where they put his brother? They put his brother off over in the corner in the club, in the dark. And they're all standing around. I've seen this happen with musicians. You've got a light around the periphery of the stage, and nobody steps into it until it's time. And this is the ritual, It's time. And when it's time, then you take that light and you shine it. But all these different songs, Am I Blue? Am I blue? Ain't these tears in my eyes telling you? And you think of the brother's obtuseness. He doesn't know what kind of shape Sonny's in. He's getting off of drugs in prison. Am I blue? Ain't these tears in my eyes telling you I'm going to get to do with it? Look, you got to communicate. You got to see these things. Was a time I was the only one, but now I'm the only one. And very significantly in the middle of the song, and every version I've ever heard of it uses this one word, which is actually kind of not essential to the song, but perhaps it is. Was a time I was the lonely one, but now I'm the only one. Lordy, Lordy. Right in the middle of the song, she's singing what some people consider to be a very secular song, except, sometimes in the African American tradition, the boundaries between sacred and secular are not so hard and fast. They're not so strong, so that it's like stepping over the room on this side and over that side, and all of a sudden it falls down. So that as we think of all of these kinds of elements that are associated with the music, and we think about the ambience and the tone of the story, the darkness, the shadows, the struggling, the aloneness, the icy dread, all those kinds of things. We think of titles of blues songs or lyrics from blues songs. The blues came down like dark night showers of rain. The world is black as midnight. Or Left Alone Blues and all these kinds of things. It's the blues environment. But it's also the gospel environment as well. And Baldwin says, are you really going to let the terminology separate you? Sonny responds, to the music he hears on the street, even though it's not jazz. He responds to it. Because he accepts that it is, in a sense, trying to communicate the same thing that he's trying to communicate as well. There are other kinds of things we're talking about. I think I'm probably running long, aren't I? Okay, so if I just let me say one more quick thing, and I'll be out of here, and that is that we can also think not only of these kinds of the imagery and the symbolism and the lyrics and all those kinds of things, but we can think about the narrative itself, in terms of being a kind of syncopated, non-lyrical narrative, where it pushes you off into a space, that happened some time ago and then comes back. Now, of course, I understand that flashbacks have been a part of written literature for a long time, so I'm not going to press that too hard. Only to say, because there's so much music in the narrative, that it seems to me that it might be reasonable to think of those kinds of things, a kind of fractured narrative, or the offbeat relation of sacred to secular, the offbeat relation of Sonny to his brother, them never quite being on the same point until we get to the end. Then we get to the creation of Sonny's new voice at the end of the story, which of course is something that is offered to us by a great deal by this African American musical tradition. Sorry I went long.
Yeah.